Good morning, everybody. I just want to remind you that if you would like to speak during the meeting, after any agenda item or at the beginning of public comment, please fill out a speaker slip there in the back with the agenda, and we'll get started in just a minute. Good morning once again. Welcome to this fourth meeting of the Ad Hoc Subcommittee of the County of Santa Barbara Board of Supervisors and the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. Thank you for being here with us today. We have another full agenda. Both myself and Supervisor Adam are here, as is, of course, the chairman and the vice chairman of the Santa Ynez Band, Vincent Armenta and Kenneth Kahn. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to let you know that for the first time, we are going out live on a webcast. Of course, all of our meetings have been filmed and been put up, but this time people are going to be able to follow it live. So we wanted to let you know that. Why don't we go ahead and we'll go right into general public comment time. This is for public comment for items that are not on today's agenda, so not the waiver of sovereign immunity and not the term sheet. And I have two speaker slips right now, Leslie Mosteller and CJ Jackson. You'll have 3 minutes. You can check the clock there. So, Leslie? Yes, please. And then the clock is right there that you can follow.
Thanks. People have gathered in Santa Barbara County to live, to raise their families, to build their lives, because they share a priority for conservation. Now, while other counties have clearly chosen a different emphasis, the majority of citizens in this county have always favored, and a majority of citizens in this county currently favor, conservation and slow growth. Now, recently, we've been bullied and are being force-fed another agenda. In the process, we've forgotten a few basic truths, and these are really elementary things, so bear with me. Truth number one, double standards are wrong. Double standards trample on other people's rights. Double standards fly in the face of equality. Double standards are divisive. Truth number two, local government and state government are the foundation for our federal government, not the other way around. Truth number three, hang on to your hats. Truth number three, there is not, nor will there ever be, a sovereign nation within our borders. I understand clearly that's not PC, but it's the truth. A sovereign nation like China, like Thailand, like France, like Great Britain, has diplomatic relationships with the United States, but at the end of the day, we're not the boss of them. They do what they like. So to use this fallacy as an excuse for trampling on our local government rights, on our state rights, and most importantly, at the end of the day, our individual rights, to use this fallacy as an excuse for that is a farce. It's a dangerous farce. And to further, once again in our great history, the idea of special rights and privileges for any individual, for any group, based on this farce, a double standard, as a response to bullying for funded politics is a dangerous farce. Thank you very much for your time and your respect.
Thank you. Next speaker, C.J. Jackson, to be followed by Doug Kurthel.
Madam Chair, thank you. Chairman Armenta, Vice Chairman Hahn, also thank you for this opportunity. Over the last 4 meetings, I've repeatedly asked a question, and it's in hope of agendizing it, or at least to try and have a dialogue about it, and part of the preceding speaker's element was there. My involvement in the community over the last 20 years has been about a consensus view of land use policy. It eventually evolved into a community plan, and it eventually evolved into getting people who didn't like each other very much to build consensus around that community plan. It talks about preservation of character and a rural agricultural character. I know that the tribe didn't have active participation in the process. One of the clear and direct concerns, fears, or worries in the community is that the tribe's essential thrust going forward is intensive development, much like the hotel. And it would go a long way if the tribe's public statements would work harder toward disabusing us if that's incorrect, or correcting that. But to be able to evaluate term sheets, to be able to take your sovereignty fully into an understanding. Supervisor Adams' comments about your global intentions as it pertains to the future and character of the valley would go a long way toward dispelling, I believe, any animosity or animus that is expressed. It wasn't that bad.
Now look what you've done, CJ.
Hey, why don't we just stop here?
I'll take music for 30, Art. Should I resume or not?
Let's
Let's pause for a moment.
yeah, let's just pause for a moment and see if anybody from the hotel comes.
Rogue teenager. The attorney didn't get up and run out of the room.
Yeah, no, the fact that the alarm is stopped, I think, was probably a false alarm. So your time was frozen, so why don't we go ahead and let you pick up. We'll give you a couple extra seconds there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but who's going to restart the defibrillator? Okay, getting back to that. The thrust of this is we keeping focused on one parcel of property while we are all aware of significant additional acquisitions, a tribal consolidation area dialogue, additional acquisitions that I think just took place in recent weeks. And it is hard for me to accept that these are all spontaneous, independent coincidences, because most of your activities, if I may pat you on the back, don't seem to be without a strategy. They don't seem to be without a plan. However, that plan and that strategy are very close to your vest. And so as we go forward to evaluate and look hard at the type of negotiations and the type of structure going forward, the air needs to be clear. And I am once again begging that the agenda talk about the vision, about the future of this valley, as it pertains at least to one side's articulated statement of intent with regard to community character, preservation of agriculture, and a rural feel. I ask that that be agendized at some point, and I would encourage Supervisor Adam to be persistent with his question, because we're looking for the answer to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Yes, Supervisor Adams.
Are we on? Yeah.
Yes.
You know, negotiation is a temporal thing. It's a thing that happens as we're all sitting here doing it, and then as we go back and formulate our positions, and then come back out and do the dance that we do out here. You know, people take actions. You know, I did ask that question. In fact, I asked that question a couple times, and our partners in negotiations have declined to go that way. Now, you know, I think the ball's in their court. If they want to bring that back up, we're always going to stand ready on this side to be able to talk about that. But at this point, you know, they've demanded a term sheet. They've gotten one. And, you know, we were able to come, Doreen and I were able to come to consensus on the term sheet. And if they want to reopen that issue, and that term sheet takes into account the fact that we're not going to find out what all that intent is, because we got forced into that position because we didn't get that information. So, you know, we can't assume anything other than kind of worst case scenario. We were forced into that assumption by the fact that we just don't have any information. So we went from there. It was demanded of us to come up with a term sheet, which we did, and some of the assumptions in there are worst case scenario, because just for lack of information. So, you know, at this point, if the tribe wants to bring more information about what their intent is and modify the term sheet, you know, that's what we're doing here. So, you know, I wouldn't expect to see that. I don't want to build the expectation on your part or anybody's part that we're going to go put that back on the term sheet or on the agenda again. You know, I think we've either passed that check valve, or it's going to come back from the tribe.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Okay, Doug Herthel and then Bob Field, and then we will move on with our agenda.
Good morning, supervisors and guests. I just want to let you know that we have incredibly good news as of yesterday, that H.R. 1157 is not going anywhere. That is on completely good information, and so I think that's important for you to know that, because that's really the impetus for this whole thing. And as the previous speaker spoke, it's a farce. So basically, the other good news is the lawsuit, Polo versus Department of Interior, is in the Ninth Circuit Court as of last week. Now, it only took us 11 years to get out of the BIA process, but we are in a real court now, and we'll keep you posted. That happened when the Ninth Circuit denied the San Ynez Band's motion to dismiss Polo's appeal. So now the entire case, including the merits, will be heard in the Ninth Circuit fairly soon. The other thing that it's important to know, that there are some extremely upstanding citizens and candidates that helped with that H.R. 1157. And so they're not doing it for politics, they're doing it for the right reasons. So I just want to say that the county should slow down, look at what's going on the legal fronts, not negotiate our sovereignty, our protection, our safety, our financial well-being. So be very, very careful. There is no enforceable agreements. There is no such thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herthel. Bob Field, we are our last speaker in public comment.
Good morning, supervisors, and Vince and Kenny, good morning. I didn't intend to speak today, but CJ inspired me when he brought up the community plan. I'd like to, I guess, emphasize a point he made and then correct, I think, an inadvertent error. You know, everybody knows this valley's pretty fractured on political and social issues. Split, fractured, I don't know what the word is, shattered. There are a few things that we have very broad consensus on, and I think these tribal issues is one. But the community plan certainly is one. It was an arduous process, but we really came together as solidly on that as anything I've seen in my almost 20 years here. So I would hope that everybody, including the tribe, would respect that about, the neighborhood. The thing I'd like to correct is CJ said the tribe, I think his phrase was, didn't have access to the process. And the process started with a valley blueprint, and the tribe was fully active in that and was one of the 40, I think it was, signatories to it. And from that blueprint, the community plan took off. And I was the chair for the last, stretch of that and got it to the finish line. And I personally offered a seat on the VPAC to Chairman Armenta or any one of his representatives outside a supervisor's meeting. And I know that Brooks Firestone also personally offered a seat on that committee. So it is true that they were not participants, but it's very true that it was by their choice. So to the extent that they are victims of a failure to participate, they are victims of their own decision.
Thank you, Mr. Field. And that's the end of general public comment. We're going to move on to our first agenda item, which is the adoption of the minutes from our last meeting on November 12th. They're just brief action minutes. I think in the past we've just kind of adopted them by consensus. So we've got some head nods here, 4 head nods. So we've adopted the meetings of the November 12th, 2015 meeting by consensus, and we'll move on to our discussion items for today, starting with 2A, the discussion of the waiver of sovereign immunity. As some of you might recall, at our last meeting, this was a topic that came up. Our county counsel, Rachel Van Mollem, had some questions. There was some dialogue between she and Mr. Cohen, the Tribals Council, and I know that they have met since then. So I'm going to turn to Ms. Van Mollem first, and then I'm sure that Mr. Cohen will be speaking as well.
Thank you. Good morning. Supervisor Farr, Supervisor Adam, Chairman Armenta, and Vice Chairman Khan. Since the November 12th meeting, Mr. Cohen, it says it's on. I'll try speaking louder. Is that better?
Yeah.
So since the November 12th meeting, Mr. Cohen and I have been discussing the waiver of sovereign immunity provision, and we've made really good progress. At the last meeting, there were 3 topics discussed. The first was the tribal resolution or authority to sign. The second was enforcement of a judgment. And the third was the county's waiver of sovereign immunity. And the county requested a tribal resolution authorizing the waiver and authorizing this authority, or authorizing signature. And in response, the tribe has agreed to provide that resolution once there's an agreement between the parties. Mr. Cohen and some members of the public requested that we review the state compact waiver language. We've done that, and I think it will work as a starting point. And the state waiver language includes language regarding enforcement of a judgment, so that addresses the second topic. And at this point, Mr. Cohen and I are still in discussions on the third topic about the county's waiver. So we will just plan on providing an update at the next hearing in January. And I don't know if Mr. Cohen has anything he'd like to add.
Mr. Cohen? Okay.
Thank you.
So, so some progress and still at least one outstanding issue that we'll be discussing. Any other comments from the chairman, the vice chairman? Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll move on to 2B, which is a review of the proposed term sheet, which there are copies of. And this was something, of course, that we talked about last time, and Supervisor Adam and I did meet then with staff and come up with this list of items that, in addition to the waiver language, which is still being worked on, was what we wanted to put forward. So I think, as I said at the end of our last meeting, we are one community. The tribe has expressed its history in the community and the fact that we all are one part of one community. And so that was, I think, a lot of what Supervisor Adam and I were thinking of, as well as, of course, what the county needs. And some of that also came out of the presentation that we had last time from our county auditor, controller Bob Geis, as far as municipal finance and how taxes and all are distributed and what they're used for. So with that, I think I would just like to turn to the chairman and the vice chairman, and perhaps Mr. Cohen, for your comments. We can take them in order or in whatever order you would like.
I did receive the response to the term sheet. I've reviewed it. I've had conversations with Mr. Cohen, and I was glad to see that the county responded. I think we're getting closer. I think the response has obviously going to have some questions. As I mentioned at the last meeting, our board recesses through the entire month of December. I haven't had the opportunity to discuss it with Vice Chairman Khan or the other committee members, and won't have that opportunity until the beginning of January. Although I do know that all of them have seen it and they all have reviewed it.
I have nothing else to add to that, so we all have the same position. Sam, any more?
Well, the only thing I'll add, I guess you're calling on me,
Please.
Mrs. Chair, is that, we responded. You guys made a demand of us, and we responded. And I would have hoped that you would have come back today at least with some preliminary comments, if not ready to discuss the subject matter, that you would have given us some feedback.
And I appreciate that. Again, it would have been nice to have a response 4 years ago. I've had a week to review this, and it was very clear at the last meeting that our board recessed through the entire month of December. Difficult for me to comment. I can give you my personal comments, but they'll carry no value nor weight without discussion from the board. I do have quite a few questions myself that I need to discuss with the board. I don't make these decisions on my own, and to ask them to come in. Matter of fact, I've got one member and actually two board members, I believe, in Tahoe. A little difficult to meet with them when they're on family vacations. But I can assure you that our next meeting in January, we'll have some response and comments to it.
So based on your initial review, can you anticipate? All right. I was just going to say, if there was additional information that you had that we could be prepared for in January, it would be nice to know that. But it sounds like because of the business committee not meeting, you're not prepared to comment in any way at this time.
I do believe that the county will receive some responses between now and our next meeting. Like I said, I know the board themselves have received it and they've reviewed it. And I think some questions will be going back and forth between Mr. Cohen and your council in regards to some of the comments or some of the items in the term sheet. I'm not saying that we're not going to comment. I think it's important when we come before we come into next January's meeting, that there be some correspondence between the tribe and the county in regards to your response to the term sheet. I'm just not prepared to make those comments in a 5-day period.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I just do want to also point out that we look closely at the information that was in your application to the BIA to to look at the term sheet, to design the term sheet, and of course, we did not have that information in 2011 when you first presented the term sheet to us. So we just didn't have the information at that time. All right, why don't we go ahead and then move to public comment on this item? And I have several speaker slips for this section. We'll start with C.J. Jackson, to be followed by Jim Marino.
You know, while CJ is coming to the mic, I just want to say that I assumed, because you told us that you didn't meet in December, and I get that. I'd like to take the month of December off too. But I assumed that when you agreed to come back that we were going to actually do something, or at least there was a potential for us to do something. And I didn't anticipate that we were going to come back and go through the exercise with no potential to do anything. And I would have just preferred to just come back in January if that was going to be the case. I mean, if you literally can't meet with your people, you know, and I don't expect you to come out here, and I don't want you to come out here and give your personal opinions, because then if you need to back off of that because you've got other considerations that you have to accommodate, then that's fine. And it kind of puts us all in a weird spot, because now we're here and we're not going to do anything. So, you know, we would have been better off had you know, I just assumed you were going to make everybody work through the holiday like everybody else does. But, you know, if that wasn't the case, I would have preferred that we just didn't have this meeting when we just came back in January, but just for the record.
Thank you, Supervisor Adam. Okay, Mr. Jackson, followed by Mr. Marino.
I'm normally not speechless, but I don't come here to waste your time and to have needless dialogue. I did hope for a robust discussion of the term sheet and relate it, but I can also quiet down, shut up, and we can wait until next month. I just hope that the posturing and the decision-making in the interim doesn't limit the efficacy of what you'll attempt to do next month, that the doors remain open, that the discussion is still there. And so with that, I won't say anything more. Thank you.
Mr. Marino? Jim Marino?
Supervisor Farr, Supervisor Adam, Chairman Armenta, Vice Chairman Khan. I'll try to be brief. I had about as much time as Mr. Armenta to review the proposed term agreement, but there's a couple of things I think that need to be dealt with, and I think it'd be important to get them in there. One is to ensure that the payments to be made in lieu of taxes will be perpetual, in the sense that no matter what happens, services and infrastructure is going to be used by whatever's out there on the Camp 4 property, so they need to be covered beyond the terms of any agreement. Just like you and I, we have to pay our property taxes more or less forever. Secondly, that the housing, such housing as is built there, be for the use of tribal members. That's the way it was represented in the application for the FIDA Trust. And so therefore it would be inappropriate, for example, for the tribe to be able to rent housing out there to anybody that wanted to rent a house and so on, or to sell it for that matter, if it could be sold or put on a long-term lease. So it needs to be something covered in there that it's for the use of the tribal members or their families as represented. Also, it was also represented in the application for FIDA Trust that the land would be used, some of the land at least, or a large part of it, for what they call land banking, which is just another way of saying you're holding the land, presumably speculating in a fashion on it. And because it's rare but possible that the tribe can take land back out of trust, that something needs to be covered in the agreement in the event that the tribe should take some of that land back out of the trust and try to sell it or whatever they want to do with it. So that issue needs to be covered by the agreement, even though it's rare. That doesn't happen often. It can happen. The authority is there. And lastly, I think we need to deal with this land consolidation issue, which was raised by the tribe and improperly approved years ago by Amy Dushke from the BIA regional office in Sacramento, because the Land Consolidation Act does not apply to that property. It's totally inappropriate. And the the issue was withdrawn, I might point out, without prejudice, suggesting that the tribe would intend in the future to renew the claim that that huge parcel of land, 11,000 some odd acres, was once a reservation of which the Camp 4 property was some part, and therefore the Land Consolidation Act should apply, when clearly it was not. Lastly, I would comment on the lack of seeing the so-called waiver of sovereign immunity and discussion of the distribution of funds from the net revenues of the casino operation. Without being able to see that as a lawyer, I couldn't tell you if what's being suggested is going to be adequate or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno. And Kelly Rose is the last speaker slip I have for this part of the agenda.
Good morning, Supervisors Farr, Adam, Chairman Armenta, Vice Chairman Khan. I want to applaud your efforts in trying to establish boundaries and responsibilities as outlined in Attachment 2B. And I think it is appropriate that it be based on worst-case scenarios because we don't know anything different. And that is a problem. The major concern, I believe, of the Valley residents is uncertainty. Uncertainty caused by a lack of enforceability of agreements entered into with the tribe, as well as the lack of transparency regarding actions taken by the tribe. We've had a lot of surprises. What we're asking for and what we need is visibility, clarity, and a shared understanding of what the future will bring to the Valley. We shouldn't find out what actions the tribe has taken or plans to take after the fact. In October, I mentioned that in 2002, the tribal leader was quoted in the Santa Barbara press saying that we have no plans for a hotel. 6 months later, we had plans for a 100-room hotel. Now we have a 300-plus room hotel housed in a 12-story building. This creeping expansion is not an isolated situation. I imagine the Board of Supervisors and the County Sheriff were a little surprised with the recent extension of the 2013 liquor license to include the existing expanded gaming floor. This is especially true given the fact that the original license granted in 2004 was substantially limited to the tribe's fine dining restaurant. In 2008, the tribal spokesperson was quoted in the news press as saying, "We don't plan to sell or serve alcohol on the gaming floor." This position was reiterated in 2012 and 2013 in connection with the tribe's request for an expanded liquor license. Among the 18 conditions agreed to by the tribe was that alcohol could not be sold or consumed in the gaming area of the casino. Many of us naively and wrongly believed that this was an enforceable limitation and an enforceable agreement. We didn't anticipate or envision that the tribe would change the game by simply banning guests under the age of 21. I believe that we deserve the right to know what plans the tribe has for the Valley so we can assess how those plans will impact all of us who live here. We also deserve to know that the agreements and arrangements between the tribe and the county will be enforceable and enforced and not just promises and best efforts. Attachment 2B, I believe, is a positive first step in achieving this outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. All right, that concludes public comment on agenda items 2A and B. Our next item is confirming 2 upcoming meeting dates, both Thursdays, I believe, both at this location, January 14th, January 28th. Chairman Armenta, so the business committee starts back in January, so those meeting dates would work and give the tribe an opportunity to review the term sheet and come back on the 14th with some, start the discussion and the comments on that.
Yeah, those dates
Okay.
are great.
All right. And so we have a consensus then, agreement on those 2 dates in January?
Yes, we do.
You'll be available? Okay, very good. So we've adopted those upcoming meeting dates, and again, for the public, January 14th, January 28th, both Thursdays, both in this location, same time. And then, obviously, I'm sorry, Supervisor Adam?
Before we move on here, it seems like there's always this uncertainty of who's going to be the chair, and I don't want to do it. And I don't think you guys want to do it. So let's just make her do it, and then it removes the uncertainty for Supervisor Farr.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you, Supervisor Adam. At least we got clarity on one thing today. Okay, so,
You know, usually you have to not show up to a meeting to get sandbagged that hard.
That's right.
But even though you showed up, it's your penance for the day.
well, thank you. All right, so obviously our topics for the next two meetings, or at least the first next meeting on the 14th, will be the term sheet. There hasn't been any additional information identified that I have heard other than continued discussions about the waiver of sovereign immunity and the language clarification there. But I haven't heard any other requests from the tribe or the public necessarily for clarification of the term sheet itself. So we will come back with those same items, and I think that's already taken us to the end of the agenda because we really didn't have any discussion then on the term sheet. I do have two more speaker slips here for the very end. Mr. Jackson, did you want to speak again? Okay, and then Karen Kuiper, and that's all that I have.
Since this agenda is walking away from what's on paper, and I don't want to belabor any point, an interesting item appeared in the second of these meetings, which was voiced and then died. And I'd like to ask Mr. Cohen, you said at the second meeting an idea of a comeback, of a revisit, of a restart in the event of a change in development use, or and then I'm sort of intrigued by that concept. This may not be appropriate for today's agenda, and I don't want to put anybody in the spot, but I thought that was a fascinating concept that would have benefited from more fleshing out. Maybe you put that on another meeting, but since this is evolving away from the discussion of what's on the agenda, I would sure like to know what that meant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, and I think that is something that's kind of embedded in some of the terms that we have, so when we have our discussion next month, I'm sure that'll be coming up. Ms. Kuiper, as our final speaker.
Hello, my name is Karen Kuiper, and this is the first time that I have attended one of these meetings. And I was just wondering, the Chumash sending their kids to school, they're using the sewer, the water, the police, and the fire department. And as I understand it, they don't pay taxes. So who's paying it for it? The gringo? And then another thing, I was in Europe.
You know, I'm sorry, Ms. Kuiper, that was on the agenda. It was on, it's a part of the term sheet.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So if you look at the term sheet, you know, under other items for consideration, there's something about that.
It's on
so that would be something that we would be talking about next time.
Oh, okay. Then I have one other thing. It is new to me that some people who want to be Americans, but at the same time they want to be different. They want to be kind of clannish and be by themselves. They don't want to be part of the community and things like that, and they want to have their own sovereign nation. The only one
Ms.
I
Kuiper,
heard...
I'm sorry, Ms. Kuiper. I think that was probably more appropriate under general public comment, because this is for the items 3 and 4 about the meetings and the topics for discussion. So I hope that you will come back next time, and I hope that you will put in a speaker slip for the beginning of the meeting and not the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I just want to say the only person that has that right is the Pope.
Okay.
The Pope
Thank you, Ms. Kuiper.
Right.
Thank you, Ms. Kuiper. All right, with that, we've come to the end of the agenda. Thank you, everybody. Any concluding comments, Supervisor Adams? Chairman, Vice Chairman?
You know, I think I would like to, topics for discussion in meeting 5, the term sheet, additional information as identified. I think it probably is important, and I said this last meeting or perhaps a meeting before, and C.J. Jackson brought it up as well. I think at some point in time there needs to be a conversation on globally as far as land and land use, parcels that the tribe owns, parcels that the tribe may consider taken into trust. I think those conversations moving forward are going to be just as important as the Camp 4 conversations. And if we're going to, I don't want to go into something in piecemeal. We need to have a global conversation. Everybody's well aware that of the tribal consolidation plan. Everybody's well aware of the late 1800, early 1900 lawsuit that took the tribe off a title on over 11,000 acres and members of the tribe off title for the purpose of a reservation. I think those conversations need to be included, and I believe it was Mr. Jackson that had made that comment earlier as well. At some point in time, moving into future meetings, I'd like to bring that up to the agenda. I did mention it a couple meetings ago.
Supervisor Adam? I think it's on.
Hello? Yep. Yeah, if you want to add that as an item, I think it's great. I mean, I started the first meeting asking for that, and we kind of got pushed off onto this other track of just dealing with Camp 4, and you know, that's okay if that's what we want to do, but now if we want to do something else, I'm open to that. I think it's a really great discussion to have, and would lead to a greater understanding of what we're actually dealing with, and I think the public would be really interested in the plans, and it's just a great idea, and I'd love to add that as a agenda item.
Process and acceptance of what's tolerable or what can be. And I guess moving forward, perhaps we should have staff discuss this, maybe put it on the late January meeting, but I think, and I had said it before, what would the county accept, if any, of land for the tribe to be in, to bring into trust? And if they were to agree to allow, without confrontation from the county anyways, or opposition from the county, the tribe to bring land into trust, what would those terms look like? I think that's where we need to move forward.
For speaking for myself, we would have to have an idea of what you wanted to do on those parcels, and so.
Get that information to you before the January 28th meeting.
Well, and then I would love it if you just come in and make a presentation on what the vision is. You know, that was what I started out asking for, is what's the vision? You know, long term, I said 100 years. If you can't do 100 years, maybe you could do 50. I don't know. But, you know, anything would be helpful. Anything would be helpful. And if we can all get on the same page and understand what the goal is, maybe we can help you achieve it.
And I agree, Supervisor Adams. Otherwise, December of 2016, we're going to be having a conversation.
God help us.
Hopefully not about Camp 4, but about some other property that the tribe has acquired. So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And, you know, we did start out this series of discussions mentioning not just Camp 4, but the Muni Escobar properties and the so-called triangle properties, 350 acres. And I think it was Vice Chairman Kahn said, you know, we don't know what we want to do with that. Our business committee hasn't even talked about it. Our membership hasn't even talked about it. So because Camp 4, what was kind of what was on the table, and we thought that was, you know, really all you wanted to discuss. That's how we've moved forward away from that, as Supervisor Adams said. I also have to say that even though the tribal consolidation area idea was put forward, it's my understanding that the tribe did withdraw that. So if that's something that you're going to put back out on the table, so to speak, out in the community as part of your long-term vision, then that's kind of a reopener of that issue that you had put out there and then withdrawn. So that is, I think, kind of a whole new area even for this series of discussions, you know, that goes beyond the properties that we had mentioned at the beginning. So staff, I know, has made notes. The chairman has indicated discussion on that for the January 28th meeting, that they would be prepared to bring forward information at that time. But at the January 14th meeting, we'll be prepared to go into more in-depth discussion of the term sheet. Comments from the business committee. Mr.
Yes, I
Vice
just
Chairman
wanted to add a little bit to that comment. You know, as far as the different parcels, I think going back to that meeting, you know, I stated that they are different, and some of them we don't know what we're going to do with. As far as us discussing what is acceptable from the county, an example would be, you know, say we were doing this exercise 15, 20 years ago. The tribe needs housing today. So the question would be, is where is that housing going to be acceptable? You know, our best scenario would have been something contiguous where we could just plug into our existing infrastructure. It would have been a lot less impact to the community. It would have been a lot less expensive for the tribe, and it would probably have been a better scenario. But we were forced into the first opportunity, which became Camp 4. Now, had we had a process of with the county supporting us and helping us identify something that was acceptable, we probably wouldn't be in this situation today. So that's what we're asking. So not to confuse it with my comments at the first meeting on the differences between the parcels and why we didn't want to lump those together in one agreement, because those are different. But as far as what is acceptable to the county for the tribe bringing into trust in the future, I'd love to have that discussion. Thank you.
I would love to see us put it on the agenda. We don't have to do much with it. As you can see, some of these agenda items go right by in a minute or two. But really, I mean, at least we'll have it on there because if we're going to do something more, I mean, this term sheet is predicated on the fact that we were only talking about Camp 4, and we kind of got stiff-armed on talking about the other parcels. So if now we want to go talk about the other parcels too, it's sort of a threshold question. If, you know, we're going to do something on other parcels also, then we kind of need to know what that is before we do too much discussion on the term sheet. Because the term sheet is just about Camp 4. So if you want to, you know, you can't do both things at once, in my mind. I can't get them untangled. So I think we better put that on the agenda, and just because you tell us something for discussion purposes doesn't mean that we're going to, you know, hang you with it later, you know. So, and you can make it clear at the time, it's discussion purposes. I mean, we're having a discussion here. If we, I mean, hopefully it doesn't take this long. God bless us, we get out of here in a reasonable amount of time. But, you know, if it takes longer, it takes longer, and it's fine. But I think you have to, if you want to come in and make what our labor negotiator calls a supposal, you know, suppose we're going to do something with this parcel, how would we view it, you know? We can't kind of, you know, you kind of want us, you seem to want us to be able to project out without any kind of a proposal at all what is going to be acceptable to us. And we can't tell you. So you need to help us to understand what you need, and then we'll do what we can to accommodate. So, you know, you got to tell us something. So I would put it on the agenda, if everybody agrees.
Yes, and again, you know, we're going off of the official documents that the tribe has filed with the BIA and what was your environmental analysis, because that's the official documents that you've had. I mean, I think, you know, again, at one point we'd asked you to go through the county's land use process, and Mr. Cohen came once, and then that was the end of that discussion. But, you know, that kind of a process is what allows for other kinds of options. So now that you own the Triangle property, if the tribe would rather withdraw the Camp 4 fee to trust request and go to the Triangle property and say, well, this is closer to our existing reservation, closer to infrastructure, and this is where we would rather put the housing, then I think that kind of goes to the issue that Supervisor Adam is talking about. And if that's kind of where the business committee is going now, because you have these other options, then, you know, before we go too far down this road, then we do need to hear from you on that. But for now, we have to go off of, you know, what you have officially requested. And again, you know, HR 1157 aside, you know, we do also have this other process that started first through the BIA. So that's what we've had to go on until we have other information from you. Is that it?
No, I want to follow up on that. And see, this is a problem on this side of the table, is we start speculating as to what you might want to do. You know, that's the first time anybody's ever said out loud that you might want to change the land use from Camp 4 over to the Triangle.
No, I said that. They didn't say that.
No, I know, but this is the problem. You see what I'm saying?
Let's clear that out.
Yeah, that's fine. You can clear it up, but the thing is, we shouldn't have to make those speculations. Don't make us make those speculations, because it's not productive.
Which is why I requested that we have a dialogue. It's great to have a dialogue. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. That this dialogue between the county and the tribe didn't exist previously. It exists now. Let's take advantage of it, and let's make it work best for both of us.
Amen.
That's my suggestion.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Good note to end on. Thank you, everybody. The meeting is adjourned. We'll see you back here on Thursday, January 14th, 2016.